to the Research for Social Change Lab podcast. For our first series, we will be presenting panel talks and conversations from our Symposium on Housing and Homelessness in Peterborough. Between 2023 and 2024, there were major initiatives to address housing precarity in Peterborough, most notably the modular housing project on Wolfe Street. In this panel, speakers Alex Bierk from the City of Peterborough, manager of the modular home project Jessica Penner, and Harvey and Auden from One City talk about how these projects were able to succeed. The panelists discuss the importance of reaching out across differences to those hesitant to solutions like modular housing in achieving Peterborough's housing goals. Further, the panelists discuss what was learned through this process and some of the roadblocks they faced throughout. The panel concludes with a re-emphasis on the importance of building bridges with those with differing views and a discussion on how to build community where we all survive and thrive.
That is a great segue into today's conversation. Something I'm really thinking about is a piece I heard yesterday in our working group, and I think probably a few more times, about the importance of not just planning. I heard from Michelle last night, we're about to do another exercise in planning in the city. We are mandated by the federal government to do these 10-year plans to end homelessness. We've all taken part in plans to enable community well-being and safety. I'm feeling some responsibility. I don't want to be asking you folks to engage in another planning exercise when it's urgent. And planning is not the work. Planning is part of the work. These conversations are part of the work, but it isn't the work. And so the work is still to come. And so I'm feeling that heaviness a little bit today because we're going to come up with some actions. And then we really, in order to make this different from every other thing we've all done the things, we need to actually commit to doing the actions together. And we need to come together across what has sometimes felt like different sides of a struggle. And that's really hard. Working with people who maybe kicked you out of housing at some point in your life, or people who work for the man, they work inside government, and maybe you've been fighting against government, but this isn't going to work, actually, unless we see each other as part of the same side of struggle. And we need to sort of take some of the wisdom Alex shared with us yesterday around the sloppiness of this work and how we can accept who we bring to the work and find ways to accommodate one another being there in their full person, even though it's messy and even though it's hard and even though it's sometimes painful and even though we're going to have to give things up and make sacrifices. And so I'm just setting this stage now for the end of the day, what it looks like to come back as a group and commit publicly to carrying some of this work forward, because it's urgent. And it isn't just about a mandated 10-year plan anymore. I think the time that, what did you say? That was Homelessness 2017, right? We're in a different place now, and that's no longer a tool that serves us in the way that it might have. So, this is a great segue into the panel that we have this morning. We have people who have been leading the change in our community from inside our city government in different ways, from outside the city government, but with city funding and support. And we have invited them here today to give us an update, tell us how it's been going. This has been really a year of change, a year of risk-taking in our community, and this is an opportunity to find out how the risks are landing a few months in, right? Knowing that this is just the beginning of a whole bunch of hopefully bold new moves locally. I wrote some things here, but I just didn't say them. Yesterday, we organized this panel to be more of a conversation, and today we're going to allow the panelists to sit here. We realize these mics do work for that. And we came up with, Jess and Alex and I actually came up with a set of questions or themes that have organized the basis of the conversation today. And like yesterday, we're not going to do boring bio statements, but each of you are invited to introduce yourselves in the way that you'd like, although keeping in mind that most of us know you, and it can be fairly quick.
Hi, my name is Christian Harvey. I'm Executive Director of City of Peterborough. Is that pretty good?
Hi friends, I'm Auden. I'm Director of Outreach Services at City of Peterborough.
Hi there, I'm Jessica Penner and I'm the project manager at the city for the modular home project.
Thanks. My name is Alex Bierk. You can call me Al. I'm an Aquarius. I like long walks on the beach.
Oh, now I want to know what everyone's astrological sign is.
Gemini.
Scorpio.
Scorpio. Oh my God.
What am I?
Virgo.
Virgo. I'm an Aries.
I don't know. Auden has told me what I am.
How do you make plans every week?
I don't is the issue.
It's me.
Thank God.
Yeah.
Okay, that was awesome. I actually believe in science, but I do still read my horoscope. So, first question. Last year, we were in a really different place. We were scrambling community agencies to pull together like a last-minute winter response. It felt desperate and like the last place we wanted to be. This year, we entered the winter months with 2 newly funded initiatives that ensure close to 100 people in our community whose needs cannot be effectively addressed in the shelter system are indoors every night. That feels like something. I'd like to invite each of you to tell us about this process, what it's been like for you, highlighting key gains that you feel our community has made in the past year, as well as ongoing challenges or tensions that are shaping the work as it unfolds. And the list goes, like the order goes, Alex to start, and you have a mic, then Jess, and then either Christian or Auden.
Okay, hi. So I just feel like I want to check in a tiny bit. I don't know how much time I have. I hope I get time checked because I like to talk. But I feel like I want to check in a little bit and to just acknowledge my privilege to be able to be up here right now and to be here for yesterday and today to be able to be talking about these things. And I was feeling sort of like angsty and twisted up about yesterday, and I was trying to just process like why I was feeling that. And I think that it felt disconnected that we are having these discussions from this place of privilege without people that are actually living right now with the things that we're discussing. And I just think about how valuable it would have been to have people that are unhoused and people who are being criminalized to be at the table I was at yesterday afternoon. I know I'm speaking in broad strokes, but and I think that's a really important part of this, you know, at the end of the day. If we just engage people that are being criminalized and that are living rough and that have been struggling and ask them what we need and take care of them, it becomes really simple, right? And I was left yesterday by being really, like my brain hurt, you know, and when I kept imagining the perspective of what we were talking about for my friends that are unhoused, and like they just need to be taken care of, money, and they just need security, like a place, right? And that's the simplest way that I can put it. And I feel like it makes my brain hurt sometimes, right? And I need to remember that in my own work that I do with the city, because on the spectrum of including people, it's like on the farthest end, right, of not including anybody, you know? And like I got suspended in grade 7 for this big fight, and I was the only one that got suspended because I instigated the whole thing. And my principal, Mr. Manley, he said, "Al, you're an instigator, and you're gonna be an instigator your whole life." And that's why he suspended me. And so like, I'm just acknowledging that that's part of my character, and I reserve the right to be wrong with my angst. And I really count on all of you guys in the community to like navigate how I'm feeling and help me translate it, you know, because I think that there's like a relationship between that can fuel the work that I do, right? And the little incremental things that we did from the city or nothing from me. It was from that way that I was able to instigate the ideas from you, right? With the fight that Christian's been doing for so long, right? To meet people where they're at, to provide the most basic shelter and support for people that are outside in the winter. Like, these are just basic things, right? And so I kind of forget the question, but I think that what's the question?
It's just for you to tell us what the process has been like for you. So you're doing it now.
And I think the process that I'm involved in is that it's the politics side of it. I gotta be really careful. But the municipal code of conduct actually prevents me from being able to be critical of a decision of council. But I think that you guys know how I feel, and I think the turning point for the stuff that happened this year was to really get the councillors that didn't believe the numbers from the outside, that didn't believe those numbers, to like really recognize those numbers from the inside. And when I say the numbers, I mean the fact that the shelter we had wasn't enough, right? So that was the starting point. That was the first step, was like the shelter. We have more people that are actually unhoused than we have adequate shelter for, right? So therefore, we do need to have basically an emergency plan for that, which is what we kind of have. And then the second thing with the tiny homes, I got 2 more minutes, Naomi,
Sure,
is that cool?
2 more minutes.
Like, people all over the country are asking me about tiny homes. I know sweet F all about a modular home. I know nothing, okay? But we were getting all these proposals by outside groups and the Chamber of Commerce and all these people to do these like projects here and there by the airport or on contaminated land or at the edge of town. And the turning point for the Wolfe Street project was like, why are we not having these discussions as we're talking about homelessness? And then the question posed to me was like, well, Al, where would we put it? And I said, put it right at Wolfe Street. and that's how that happened. So, yeah.
So maybe I'll just take it from there. I joined the city in August on a train that was moving full steam ahead with the modular project. So I wasn't there for the early stages of those conversations. In August, we had yet to start construction. We still had the encampment in the location where we needed to do that construction, and so we needed to sort out all those sorts of pieces. And so I think, as I mean, there wasn't much of a settling into the role. It was more of a, how do we make this happen in a very short time frame, and then in a way that is going to work for people. And I think for me, looking at the operationalization is how do we make these systems work at the municipal government level, and then to create a solution that actually functions in reality for people. And I think we all know there's a lot of challenges with that. What are those challenges? You know, even myself, we're learning as we go with this, and I guess that maybe I'm getting ahead of myself. That is the next question. But it obviously was possible, but on the inside, it's definitely a super challenging situation. But what this does for us is it helps fill one gap, and we know this is just one gap. This isn't solving the whole problem, and we're hoping that what this does do is helps us look at what other gaps do still exist in this context of at least filling this one gap.
I'll go with this one.
This is on microphone.
I'll talk about a few different things here. One is that, just so everyone knows, currently what One City is operating is Trinity Community Center, which is a drop-in center that during the winter time offers a winter emergency response, which is 45 beds for 6 months until, at this point, till the end of March. We're hoping longer. And then at the daytime is sort of a replacement of one roof. Community Center, which is a daytime drop-in for anyone with access to food. The process itself was interesting. I think going back to last year's stopgap is important to recognize, because last year what happened was a bunch of organizations came together and challenged, I think, narratives that were dangerous and that were guiding a lot of the decisions that were being made at the municipal level. There was three major assumptions, I think, that were there. The first one was that there was enough shelter beds for all the people living outside. We knew the numbers weren't true of that, right? But that was guiding the decision-making process, not of all, but of many within our shelter system, right? And so stopgap was a bunch of organizations coming together and saying, actually, that's not true. The second thing was to disprove the belief that even if we had enough shelter beds, people wouldn't use them anyway. Yeah. Right? That was another assumption that was there. And what we wanted to show is actually, it's not just that people will use no shelter beds. It's how shelters are run that is important, right? And it's not that it's a mystery as to why people would use shelter. We know the information, right? There has been, we could look at the shelter injustice study that the Research for Social Change Lab did. We could look at, we did our own exit interviews, if you will, with those who were using stopgap last year. Or look at well, you can't look at it, but there's a pulse survey that was a pilot that won't be released. Super interesting, you can't look at it. But then but there'll be another pulse survey that you're gonna get to look at. But all of these tell us the same thing, is that people don't use shelter because restrictions and rules make them feel like jails, right? And that's what we hear over and over and over again, is the more we make something feel like it's a prison and take away people's not anatomy, that would be really bad though. Don't do that. Autonomy. No way. Autonomy, when we do that, people will not use it. So we need to do creative alternatives that recognize that. As well, we know that taking harm reduction seriously in a drug poisoning crisis is of the essence. And if people feel like they can't use shelter safely, they will not use shelter. And so we know those things. We have done study after study after study, and we have learned these things, right? And so this was, the stopgap last year was an attempt to show that in action that these assumptions were false. And I think it was successful. And to the credit of the municipal government, they heard that, right? And they said, okay, let's do something different. And there has been quick response, which I think has been really exciting. The question here what have been the good sides? The good sides have been partnerships where maybe partnerships have been a bit fractured for the last little while, right? So those things are exciting when we have those pieces come together. I would say some of the struggles, and there has been a few, one or two, right, is definitely different ideologies coming together to try and find a way to work together, right? Different people understand harm reduction in different ways, and obviously those come to a clash, right? We have different understandings of priorities. To name it very clearly, one city has no interest in displacing tents. Right? Well, that is not, and we don't exist for that, right? We didn't open a drop-in center so that tents would be displaced. But ending tenting is a priority for some, right? Those will come at odds with each other. So those things coming at odds do have tensions. It doesn't mean they're insurmountable. We all have the goal of ending homelessness, but I think that's where some of the tensions are. Sorry. I'm taking the lead on this one. Auden's the next one. So. Oh, sorry. Yeah, there you go.
I'm the co-chair of the board for One City, just disclosure. So there's a relationship with this organization, but Christian and I both really love the mic.
Amen.
So watch out. Okay, loving this. So related to the dynamism that is part of operationalizing this moving vision, or people talk about building an airplane as you fly it, you've all been thrust into new spaces where the learning curve has been sharp. Jess, you were the leader of the Peterborough drug strategy, and now you're leading an innovative modular housing community, right? Those are big shifts in mandate. What have you folks learned so far about the political and pragmatic aspects of this work that you think is important for all of us to understand as we continue to collectively strive towards the realization of the right to housing. And this time the speaker order is just Auden and Alex.
So one of the biggest things that I've learned over the last 6 months, and this is going to sound really boring, but it's so crucial to this work, I think, as we think about what the role of the municipality is, at least in leading housing, is, and Jocelyn and I, shout out to Jocelyn, we have spent more hours and hours in meetings over the last 6 months trying to sort out the insurance. And that, honestly, like, I don't think I can articulate the scale of this as one of the. There were times when we thought this isn't going to happen. We're not, everyone thinks we're doing this, and now it's roadblocked because of insurance. And there are changes with insurance, and again, this feels like something that shouldn't be limiting the work that we do, but it really is going to limit the work moving forward. There's my understanding, and I am not an insurance expert in any way, shape, or form, and I hope to never fully be one, although that's being sort of forced upon me, is that there's been some changes in the way that insurance companies will insure municipalities related to housing projects. This is new since COVID, so it's not something that's been the case for a long time. And so we didn't anticipate this going into this project, and so we really had to shape the project in ways that we didn't necessarily intend to from the outset. And this will be a challenge moving forward as well, as municipalities, especially the City of Peterborough, that will dictate how they can lead the way in which they interact with housing projects. And also that there's implications for folks in the room, because EFRI, they're not here today, unfortunately, but I mean, Debbie and I and insurance, it's just it's like this triggering word now, that, EFRI really had to step up and take on a lot of risk with this project that was not the original intention, because it's easier for nonprofits to get insurance than it is for the city. It's actually not even possible for the city to get insurance. There is no insurer that will insure us to do this work. And so I think that as we imagine what the role of the municipality is in providing solutions related to housing or homelessness, this is going to be a really big piece of the puzzle. And so I wanted to share that because it's really important. It doesn't feel like it should be, but it is. But the other thing I want to learn or share about my learning is that I had never worked inside the municipality before, and there are a lot of champions that needed to be in the right places to make this work happen across the inside. And so I think that I've learned this so many times over my career that champions can really achieve immense changes in systems, and so I just want to share that, like, the learning for me is that is possible when you have the right people in the right roles to open the doors for ideas like this, because without so many champions that I can't even fully articulate throughout the internal workings of the city, this project would not have happened. And so as much as it isn't the solution, it really is. It started hopefully a path based on hopefully evidence to make changes that we need to see. I don't know who's next.
Thanks, Jeff.
We could also just clap after each round if you want to, like, really exuberant clap.
You can clap after me, it's fine. I'm gonna give, that's a lot of big words. I'm gonna give this a shot. Yeah, I mean, personally, this right here is the biggest learning curve for me. Like, trying to take everything that's jumbled up in my heart and in my head and, like, articulate it in a room of people that are looking at me. That's weird and hard. So I'm learning from the best, but it's hard. And like, to echo what Jess said, the like, working previous to this, I've like worked with the city in different ways, super different ways. I was not expecting to have to know so much about building code regulations, for example. Like I'm not interested in knowing about it, but it's like necessary. So that's been tough. Like what you're asking here is what we all need to understand, I think, and those aren't things that necessarily I've learned in this position, in this work, doing this project, but they're things that like it's reinforced for me, and I think focusing on like the piece around us all being on the same page with it. Christian talked about like the need for these programs for low barrier spaces and how the existing shelter system does work for some folks. Like we shouldn't say that it should all be the same, right? It's that we need these different spaces, these different options for the for those whose needs aren't met with that system. And so the need is there. It's big. It exists. We have to work together to find those solutions. And then the other piece is that it's not actually a solution. That word I just said, it's not actually a solution. That it like makes it less visible, right? Becomes that rug under which we sweep the issues, right? But that it's just one piece. It's just one piece of the bigger puzzle. Do you want to add to that?
Yeah, so can I
Yeah, go ahead. Oh, thank you.
I think what Auden's saying is so important in that idea that we are, we actually, this is not an answer to homelessness. And if we ever present it as such, we are misrepresenting. It is really important to address immediate needs and to do the bandage on the wound, right? That stuff's important, but we can't pretend it's more than that, right? And so, and that I think is so important. And the fact that these programs can be used as a way in which to hide the reality, right? When Tent City emerged in 2019, all of a sudden everyone was like, what the heck? We have a homelessness problem, right? The only thing that was different on July 1st from June 30th is that people weren't hidden in a basement anymore, right? They were out in the open, and all of a sudden people were driven to do something about it. Similarly, my concern is now we don't have an encampment anymore, and people out of sight, out of mind, people are not committed to saying, okay, we've got a homelessness crisis. The fact that they're sleeping in a hall at Trinity is not answering the issue. We also know the amount of people becoming homeless is more than the amount we're able to house people, right? If that's the case, then it is not just there are 50 people, we have to find a way to house them. It's how do we turn off the tap? Right? These things are of the utmost, and our program is important because it does put a bandage on a wound, but it does not in any way stop whatever it is from cutting, right? And I think we need to hold on to that, and as nonprofits, we have to be committed to doing advocacy, or else we become complacent or compliant in being a part of the issue itself, right? We become compliant in the actual hiding of the issue, and that I think is of the utmost importance. So when we talk about being a rug, we are the rug that the issue's brushed under, but we're going to be a really ugly shag carpet that you're like looking at and you're like, why is that rug there? Right? And that's really important for us as an organization.
What have I learned? I don't know. Like, I've learned so much, and like, I just want to sort of pick up where, like, I'm interested in these discussions we're having with what Christian said, where it's like we're focused on the column A, which is the crisis point, and how are we going to like quickly rush to triage that crisis point. But I think that there's so many solutions that exist outside of that column. You know, I've grown up here and I've seen a downtown that's really changed, and I've seen a way that the middle class and the working class are able to function really change. You have a consolidation of commercial landlords in the downtown, which makes it really difficult for people to have their autonomy and start a life or start a business or have the sense of stability that they need to be part of the social fabric of the community in ways that was like much easier back in the day. And that's very interesting to me, because like a lot of the political decisions that are made are in that column, you know, and so that's one thing. But if we're talking about the two projects, and the homelessness, the HP, like I don't know what you guys call it, another acronym probably, but if we're talking about the thing we're here for, which is the the Trinity Center, and the Wolfe Street response. It's been like incredibly intense, and in 1,000,001 ways that no one knows about, and because there was challenges like weekly and daily with the sort of steps of the project, and every one of those steps put the project that in theory was approved, it put the project in jeopardy in ways that in every way imaginable, and that's interesting. I think the cool thing, the reason why we were able to work so quickly, because it's pretty quick the way that it happened, was because of the co-collaboration within the city. So I know that the building department really helped with Trinity, and I know that because the city owned the Rehill site, we were able to do things really quickly there, using departments within the city to make things happen fast. And then just to come back and to try to simplify things, like at the end of the day, this is just for my side of it, it's just about trying to understand the viewpoints and opinions of the people that are across from me that think differently than me. And so how do I acknowledge their feelings and their opinions on the subject, and not alienate them, but try to have us meet in the middle and eventually come across to where we're at with this, right? And at the end of the day, it's just a game. It's 6 votes, right? Two-thirds of the 11 will rescind the bylaw, the tenting bylaw. This is just a fact. I'm not saying an opinion on it. 6 votes will amend the bylaw, right? So don't talk to me about it, right? Right? And it's just a game. That can happen in one night, like Monday. That can happen, right? And I want to say, as a politician, I'm an artist, right? That's my career. I'm an artist. And the hardest part about being a politician is feeling so isolated and so alone in my opinions and my beliefs and my understanding of what the right thing to do is. I feel so alone in that. And I'll tell you, the voice that's very loud is the voice that's on the other side. It's in the media, it's in social media. The majority of the other politicians and the mayor and the executive city staff, it's in all their ways of communicating, on LinkedIn, via email. Sometimes we get 300 emails a week against everything we're talking about, and zero. We haven't gotten one. Maybe we've had one. Joel, I like to exaggerate, but like we pretty much, I can't remember an email that we've had that has said, Mayor Leal, Council, we applaud what you've done at Trinity. We applaud the reaction that you had at Wolfe Street. The emails we get are, people are setting up in my storefront across from Trinity. Build a fence. I feel like I'm a hostage in my backyard on Weller Street. No, I can't even get into it. We got called. Me and Joy La Chica got called for 30 people on Weller Street telling us that they felt like they were in prison. And I said, no, that's my world. That's my world. And I said to them, and I learned this from Keith Riel, I said, do you want the political answer that's going to make you feel good, or the real answer? And they said, no, give us the real answer. And I go, you guys are wild to think that you're in prison. You're nuts, because you're not. And yeah, but, so what am I trying to say? I'm trying to say that in these rooms where everyone is like aligned, more or less, it makes sense, but in a lot of the other rooms where really important decisions are being made to the issues that we're discussing, there's no voice like this, right? So I don't know if that, and I guess that's something I learned.
Yeah. So before we move on, I want to plant a couple seeds for the action phase later this afternoon, because I'm hearing some things that would be helpful, I think. So one is the limits of what a city government can do in terms of some very bureaucratic things, insurance and debt. And we talk sometimes about the promise of public-private partnerships. That's a lie. Those promises have never helped the public. Yeah. They've really advanced the bottom line of the private sector because it's allowed for growth in capital, using the public or the public sector as a source of capital expansion. But nonprofit government partnership is something maybe worth exploring. It came out yesterday in one of the sessions I was in, and I'm hearing it again today, and I think that's just something to think about as we move towards actions. The other thing is about council and political strategy around who's making decisions in on our city and whether they represent evidence and our interests. And so again, just something for later to think about whether council is a site for action. When's the next election?
There's an open house on Sunday.
Yeah.
You talk to your councilor.
Yeah, the next election, I don't know, three years, but it's like, this is the thing though, is like you could be Barack, like Christian. Christian is beautiful. Truly, he's beautiful. He's charismatic. He's bright-eyed. He's got energy. He knows the facts. He's smart.
Yeah.
No, but you know what I mean. Like
He's a Virgo.
Like it's not. No. But listen, hear me out though. It's not. This is not like. It's not like he's just not good enough at selling the others on the idea. That's not it. That's not it. It's like what does our approach need to be, and how can we do it differently? And how are our voices like not just showing up in an upheaval type of way, but how can we like chop the wood and carry the water of really like spelling out the culture of what's happening so people really understand it. Like my buddy, you talk about the systemic nature of the shelter system. My buddy Chad, known him all my life, he got kicked out of the Brock Mission for eating Smarties in bed, and he slept under a culvert on Bethune Street for the rest of the summer. Like that illustrates, like we need those stories. We need to use those experiences to illustrate what's happening.
Yes.
Sorry.
I have something to say in the back again. This. So all of these resources, all these places for people to go, like wonderful work, so great. Being Indigenous, Two-Spirit crap. Where are my trans homies falling into this? They're not. They're falling through the cracks. My trans sister in this room is not being met with kindness, compassion, basic needs. Like there's so much exclusion within the groups that need the most help. And I feel like we need just policy and like somebody always advocating for them in every room. Like there should be someone Indigenous on this panel. There should be someone Indigenous on every panel. I would run for mayor, but like I watched what my friend Dee went through, like gender-based violence. I can't survive that. We need marginalized voices everywhere, and I'm just really concerned for my trans homies. I'm trans boy. Like as long as I keep my shit together and my husband keeps his shit together, they could be housed. They could stay with mom and dad forever. There's people out there that don't have that, and they're like, I'm going to bed at night in my bed. I don't know if my friends are okay. So, miigwech, again, and thanks for having me, even though I wasn't invited.
Love you, Ashley.
Thank you. So Ash is illuminating some of the roadblocks that we have to face and that are facing people in a really visceral way every day in our community. We still do have a shelter system that operates around a gender binary. I don't know how we can justify this as a community. I don't know how this remains something that we accept. It's something that we need to keep calling out. It's not okay. And on this topic, it's really difficult to change also how things are working. This is what we're in this process of trying to do this thing of changing public narratives, institutional practices, and community responses. One of the things that I know from conversations with folks on this panel is that right now there's a spotlight on these projects and a whole bunch of political and social pressure to quickly demonstrate that this is like successful, that we win, that we did it, that we solved homelessness. And if we can't do it in like 15 minutes, then it's a failure and we pull the plug. So I also know, and Al sort of illuminated bits of this, that there are a ton of vocal detractors who challenge harm reduction as a scientific and medical practice, and a social practice, and a cultural practice, and just a life-saving move, challenge decriminalizing and rights-based perspectives, which all of these local responses to some degree are seeking to reflect. At the same time, more and more members of our community are facing economic precarity. This the problem is swelling behind us. And one unequivocal driver of homelessness across everywhere in the global north is poverty, is precarity, is inequality. We know this. So from your perspective then, what do you think are the most significant of all these challenges coming our way in the next 5 years that we need to mobilize around as a group in order to at least not lose ground? Like sometimes it comes down to that, and then hopefully gain. Oh, and the order is Christian or Auden, Alex, and then Deb. Oh, Jess. Deb's not.
I mean, yeah, all of the things you just said, right? I think about like 5 years ago and how much has changed in 5 years, and what like 1 to 5 years could look like for us. It's hard to kind of imagine, but I think about like the immediate challenges, like in a couple of months, and then again next spring the overnight program is going to close, and that program is at capacity every night, and so that's a lot of people who will have nowhere to go, and there's no longer an encampment, there's no longer an overflow shelter. Our program replaced the overflow, which was largely unused, and so we have like 45 plus people in the spring who will have nowhere to go, and that's going to be a challenge.
Working on that.
Thanks. And like and like the bylaw in working on that too.
Yeah.
And then the growing wealth, what do you call it? Disparity. That's going to continue to be a challenge. We're going to continue to see an increase in homelessness, right? And that's going to be challenging. The 45 beds that we have, even if there was space in the other shelters, like that's 45 people who can't use that system, whether that's because they're people who use drugs, they have severe mental health issues, they are trans women, they are people who feel unsafe in those environments, or whose needs can't be met there. There are people with partners and no dependents who would rather stay outside than be separated from their partner. And then this is a little bit like personal, I guess, but I see I don't really want to call it burnout, but like we're putting an emphasis on the importance of like having people with lived experience in these roles, and it's really hard to do that, right? It's hard for me, and I have like so much privilege and access to support and resources, and it's hard for me.
Yeah.
And so I think about like frontline staff and who are doing the hardest jobs, right, with the least amount of job security. Our overnight staff are working on 6-month contracts, right? And so they also don't have access to benefits or like mental health support, or they have the lowest wages, right? Like we're gonna run through folks pretty quickly. And I think we have to be talking about that, so.
And like to just continue that thread is like the thing. So what have I learned? I remember early on in our homelessness meetings, just really understanding that the system of taking someone from homelessness and putting them in a place with 4 white walls with no supports attached was like this cycle of homelessness. It created this cycle, right? And then, so you'd see these stats of like, hey, we house 460 people, but it might have been my buddy Shankster like 12 times a year, right? And so it wasn't working. And so what does that mean? It means that there's a need for supportive housing. So what does that mean? Well, we need to have a high client to staff ratio in all these areas, right? Well, what does that mean? Well, you have to pay people like Alana and Auden and take care of their mental health. Because this, like you said it better than I could. This is work that no one would want to do for like what, 18, like to get like a work, like a living wage. I don't know what you guys, I didn't graduate high school, so I struggle with the terms, but I think it's like a living wage or a working wage. Like it's just enough. It's barely enough, right? It's barely enough. So I think that's a focus, and that's a fear for the future. Is like people are just gonna be burnt out from this work because it's already happening. So if that's one of the things that is part of a successful plan, then we have to take care of the people that are doing the work. So yeah, that's one thing. I forget what else I was going to say. I think that in my vision is to also have to make a push to have city councillors be paid a living wage, like a full-time wage. Like I'll show you my phone, like I left the full day here and I had a community grants committee meeting from 6 o'clock at my studio until 9:30 at night. And then I had a call from a councillor after the meeting about a 10 out of 10 intense thing that we have to discuss. And I got home and I was wiped, right? And it's like every day is like that. And so to get people that are going to tackle these issues from our knowledge base and put everything that they have into the work, you have to pay them. You have to pay them, right? And counselors are getting paid for 20 hours a week, and there's some counselors that are working 60 a week and some that are doing the 20, right? So it's going to be one of my pushes to change that. So I hope I can find support in that, and thank you. And I think just back to the starting point about how like if you remember, I said like we have to come across the bridge with people, right, on the other side. And so the thing is I think people need to feel like they are doing something. Like the idea of we've solved homelessness. Don't worry. I am the cowboy in that room to tell them that they haven't. Don't worry. But there has to be some sort of feeling like they're doing the right thing by these approaches, right? That we all know are just a starting point, right? But there has to be some sort of good feeling from that to support the next thing, and then to support the next thing. And so like I think at council we're going to have, I hope I can say this, but if not, it's cool. We're going to have a report coming that looks at the financial side of these approaches that we're talking about. That's going to be a report. And so what would be great would be to have a community of delegates show up when that report comes to just be really thankful and grateful that the city has done this, and then to maybe plant the seed for what could be done next, right? That would be amazing, And we're hearing from some of the biggest retractors or people that were against Wolfe Street. Like we had a neighborhood liaison committee, and they were basically the reason for the huge fence. They said no, we're not. They wanted the fence, right? And then Jeff Leal added that to the report to add the fence to the project. We literally had, I don't know if I can say this. We literally had the person who wanted the fence in the meeting be like, "Can we take the fence down?" Right? So we need to just take advantage of how this is changing people's viewpoints and just keep rolling with it, if that makes sense. And then on to the next thing. And I think that the next step for the bylaw would be to take the lead from Hamilton and just amend a portion of the bylaw to allow people to set up in X, Y, and Z park with X, Y, and Z stipulations. I think that would be something that could have the potential to happen.
As I think about roadblocks as we move ahead, I'm thinking obviously there's a lot of changes that I think are within our capacity, but obviously housing stock is fundamentally also the problem. And I just want to remind everyone that even these two initiatives, which are innovative and required a million little pieces to fall in place to even make them possible, were ultimately able to happen because of an increase in funding. And so I mean, I can't speak to before my time at the city, but you know, I think that without this increase in funding, even with all those right people in the places, even with the work that everyone's doing, we wouldn't have seen these projects happen this year without that money. And so it's a really important piece to remind everyone of, that like there are some things that are within our control and I think we can do better, but there's also you know, we know that the responsibilities financially for this are beyond the scope of what the municipality can fully take on from a real sort of legitimate perspective. And so we need provincial and federal help. The money that did come in is federal funds, and so that was great, but we HPP,
That was Dave Smith.
federal, provincial.
Yeah,
Oh,
Joss, I won
sorry.
that one, eh? Wow.
Wolfe Street was provincial.
Provincial, yeah.
Monaghan
Right.
was federal.
Right.
It was Dave
Sorry.
Smith, the HPP funding.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. That's
I'm
very,
new. I'm new.
That's very rare. I get to correct them on that kind of thing.
Anyhow, regardless, we need more further investments to be able to do the large scale changes that are needed. And so I really I do think that will be, regardless of who believes what as the real problem or how we fix it, to really solve things in the way that I think we would all like to see. We do need further funding to make that achievable.
Can I make a comment in response to that?
But do it loudly.
Yeah. One of the aspects of funding is recognizing that housing first approach is in fact a cost saving for the municipality. Through providing housing, permanent supportive housing for people, it offsets the costs, other costs that are imposed through trying to care for people in the way that it's being done presently. So while funding, I recognize that funding is a problem, we also need to get behind the idea collectively that permanent supportive housing is the financial solution to the problem from many points of view. And yes, it will require some funding, but in the big picture, it actually reduces the cost to the community. It makes it a better place to live at the same time.
I don't disagree with that at all. I think also, though, it's not just municipal savings. It's the health systems. It goes, and again, the municipality doesn't control how health spends its funding, and so it's not like it's not like the municipality is in charge of how much emergency services will be saved if we properly house people. So anyway, I'm not trying to make excuses for that, though. I do agree wholeheartedly with you that there are a lot of savings to the system when you house people properly.
One more quick comment, and then we're wrapping towards.
Can I just respond to Auden that the NDP dental plan is coming in, so people will have benefits. Check with your dentist that they're signed up, or your independent dental hygienist. So if you do not have benefits, 2024 is the majority of people, but by 2025 it'll be everybody who's eligible.
Thanks, Jackie.
Okay, so we're moving rapidly towards the close. So this is just an invitation for like a final idea from each of you. So the work you're doing is politically and socially important. The magnitude of the challenges can overwhelm us. We've been talking about this and leave us feeling hopeless and exhausted. frustrated, angry, raging. In closing, I'd like to invite each of you to share one word, an image, or an idea to kickstart our imaginative process. So remember what Jane said yesterday about imagination being key to what we do moving forward. We cannot feel limited by column A and column B, as Al said. We need to blow those columns apart and imagine a new way forward. So inspire us to kickstart our imaginative process going into this day and into our lives as best you can. Don't give me that face.
What have I been doing this whole time?
Yeah, right?
Has to go first.
Or
Jeff.
use this for anything that's still
Christian,
burning in your heart that you want to share with the room before we turn.
Yeah, Christian,
to
get
the
it fired up,
audience.
bud. Get it fired up.
Okay. That's all I do. I think for me, one of the things that is most important for us to hold on to is that our homelessness crisis is not just a homelessness or a poverty issue, it's a wealth issue as well, right? We are not going to be able to engage in changing this unless we begin to address the income inequality, which isn't it just getting people who have less more, but it's also those who have more having less, which is not as exciting a conversation and really hard to get people to vote for. But I think that if we begin to have real conversations, not just to the choir, but to those who have different perspectives on this, to say, how do we begin to reduce this? How do we work together to create a community where we're all able to survive instead of just some of us? That, I think, is a revolution. I don't know what it is. I mean, Joelle's been doing this for a long time. There's many in here who've been trying to have this conversation for a long time, but I think there is possibility in getting people across the aisle, whatever that aisle is, to begin to engage in different conversations, especially because now, sorry, this was more than one word, but especially because now that it's affecting everybody, right? No one can pretend, once it hits Weller Street, all of a sudden things begin to, there's people who want to have different conversations. No offense to Weller people. But I think that is something that is really important, is that we can begin to have conversations that maybe weren't available then.
Yeah.
That's not one word. I cheated.
That's fine.
No, she said an idea.
Okay, that was
anything, any glass moving, whatever, things.
Okay. Can I go after someone?
Yeah.
Oh, actually, I had my own.
I guess I don't know how innovative it is, but I think Al kind of started to talk about how the neighbors want the fence to come down, and just that's more about sort of a reflection of the impacts in the neighborhood, and that we're starting to hear that things are going well, and that they want integration, they want people to be part of the community, and so that's where that comes from. And I think as we think about innovation and other evidence-based interventions there hasn't been appetite for in the past, there are examples in our community that we need to leverage to try and push forward new innovation. We saw with the CTS coming into town that a lot of the problems that community members saw were solved by resourcing people in the way that they need to be resourced, right? And the same thing is happening with the modulars, in that the community there are improvements in the community because people are housed. These are things we all know. And so we will be, obviously it's still early days, but as we start to share the results of how things are going, hopefully people in the room can use that and use those results to talk about other innovative approaches where we're doing similar but different projects that will that will likely have the same impacts.
Yeah, you guys know it was one word, right?
Yeah.
That was a joke.
Or idea.
Watch me go now. No, I'm gonna keep it simple. I think that I have a real desire to just rein in all of our ideas and simplify them, really simplify them. I think it would be really nice. I kind of forget the question, but I think it would be really nice to form an idea from Joelle, which is to have a Community Coalition, right? Which is a group that helps to keep municipal government accountable, right? And I think it would be really great to form a working group to be able to not just tap into everyone's brains in like a crazy ADD way for like 2 days, but like in a real tangible way where it's like, this is the challenge, and you and you and you and you and you from all of your areas of expertise, how are we going to do this? And just take it one thing at a time. And so I think we need to set up a sort of a framework to look at how that happens, right? So that we can get like a real working group together to use all of our different like, help me with, like all of our things that we're good at.
Collective knowledge.
Yeah, our collective knowledge, right? I told you I'm the instigator, right? But I need that like laid out simple plan, and I think we just attack it one step at a time as it comes, and yeah, that's my thing. I mean, I even think about here, like, I just feel weird. I felt so weird being here yesterday with all the rooms and the houses and the food, and it's like, are there pockets of places like this all around Peterborough? Like,
Yes.
yeah, it just felt strange to be talking about like homelessness and criminalizing poverty and homelessness, like in this place, which I walk by like a lot of rooms, and so like how can we think creatively about finding people what they need? Thanks for letting me just be like angsty a little bit. I appreciate all of you.
When I mentioned earlier just about like how this kind of thing is the biggest learning curve for me, I meant that like I'm just a simple guy with simple ideas, I feel, and I tend to like kind of default to talking about things like my education and my professional experience and like the things that legitimize me in these spaces, right? And that stuff is really important. It obviously gave me access to knowledge and like skills development and opportunities to meet people who I admire and respect in these huge ways who still teach me things all the time. Lots of whom are in this room right now, so hi. Oh, thank you. And, you know, it doesn't capture the like how or why when it comes to my connection to this work, right? I don't remember my first experiences with homelessness. I just know that they happened early and they happened often, and it was just kind of like a part of my life from the beginning of my life. And so by the time I was 15, I was completely disconnected from my natural family. I was homeless, I was pregnant, and I had dropped out of high school. And by 18, I had lived in like 40 different places. That's more than double, right? A year. So that's a lot. All that to say that like I didn't know what the word home meant for a really long time. This next one might come as a shock to everyone here, but I'm also queer and non-binary. I know. I know. And like at the end of the day, all of that stuff meant that it was really hard for me to find a sense of belonging in almost any space I was in, including here, right? Like it's still weird for me to feel okay, and especially like to share this stuff with you. It's not a thing that I really know how to do yet. And that's why it just feels really simple to me when I'm like, I do this because I want people to feel a sense of belonging when they don't have that. Because for me, that looked like, it saves my life every day. Mm-hmm. So that's not innovative, I don't think. It's not like a big idea. But that's like the thing that I think is most important for me to share. So thank you for being here.
I'm so glad we waited.
Yeah.
It's your turn. questions or comments to the group? I have the microphone.
Let's
I
go
love
with the questions.
to walk.
Let's go. We need some.
I'm wearing sneakers.
Representing, but my line of work is I work with people who have a developmental disability for over 30 years. A lot of individuals with a developmental disability are homeless. They have an incredibly hard time navigating the shelters, often can't fill out the paperwork, have a great cloak of competence, so you probably don't know that they can't fill out the paperwork. And contrary to a lot of people's belief, there is not nearly enough supportive living options to meet their needs. Currently, there are over 3,000 people on the registry for Developmental Services Ontario who are waiting for a 24-hour supported living environment. And there were, through developmental services, there were, I believe, less than 20 placements last year. We have an increasing amount of individuals who are living with their incredibly elderly parents, who don't have a succession plan. And most of these individuals are on ODSP. They could never live in a rooming house. It just wouldn't work. They would need a whole lot more support. So not to be sort of like a huge sort of downer, but I am very, very scared. I am incredibly glad that we closed the institutions in the 1990s in Ontario. Some of them are still open, and the abuse rages on in the West, out West and different places. But we are in different times. There aren't institutions. We aren't putting people away anymore. This is the, like 1990, not that long ago. So we have a lot of vulnerable people who are homeless right now or are at high risk of being homeless when their aging parent passes away and they don't have family that can take care of them, and there is not the infrastructure at all. I don't believe that developmental services has an increase to their overall budget since the 1980s. Anyway, I just wanted to sort of put that out there. I don't ever hear about people with developmental disabilities being discussed as a really vulnerable people that are homeless and at high risk of being homeless. And they just have so many, if you have a developmental disability and you have an addiction, sorry, you can't get addiction supports because you have a developmental disability. If you are a person who have a developmental disability and you also have schizophrenia, sorry, you can't get support from the ACT team because you have a developmental disability. So there is a lot of ways that they are shut out. Sometimes they're shoved into long-term care homes, and that doesn't work out well either. So anyways, I just wanted to put that out there. I haven't heard, I was here last year, I didn't hear anything about developmental disabilities, and here again, and I just wanted to put it out there. There's a huge population out there, and things are different.
I think what you're naming there is one of those huge gaps that exist. This is something that the need for 24/7 supportive housing in our city is massive, right? A couple years ago, our management team did kind of a visioning process and recognizing the need for long-term care facility for people who are coming out of homelessness and out of prison because they're so often not able to access those because and so there's this combination of a whole lot of things right now. Just to name, we're experimenting aside of what we do that we don't talk about as publicly is people reintegrating from the prison system, and we're actually experimenting right now on that side with we have an aging crisis in our prisons. Like the amount of people who are over 50 in our prisons has increased by 50% in the last 10 years. It's massive, and so that is something that we need to address, right? And so we've started with experimenting with what would it be to run CRFs or halfway houses that are healthcare models, sort of. We're doing that because there's money there to see what would it look like to do it on the homelessness side, right? What would it do? What would it be to say, to address exactly what you're talking about? We don't have money that anyone's giving us to experiment with it on that side. So how do we figure out what a model might look like on this side so that we could then bring what we know there and bring it? Because what you're saying, it is already a crisis and it's only going to get worse, right? That's all that, and so we need to have answers to how do we address that sooner rather than later. Yeah. So thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, and it's not, and I don't want to say that everybody who has a developmental disability needs 24-hour living. Majority don't. So, but I'm just saying that it's the same, people who, they're so easily scammed by potential landlords if they'd even look at them because they're on ODSP. Those types of things. So just so vulnerable.
Yeah, totally.
And I really love to connect with you after this because I think it's important. It's an important message for the decision makers to understand that aspect of it. And when I led by this, the thing that I learned the most was that within our shelter system, we were experiencing a huge way of it being stagnant. So when we built the new Brock Mission, or when they built it, they had the Brock 15, which was meant to be the transitional part of the Brock. And broadly speaking, I think it's like the majority is 65 plus with tri-morbid health issues, right? So it has essentially turned into a long-term care facility without the support,
And there is evidence that show that people who have a developmental disability are much more likely to have longer stays in shelters because they just can't navigate the next steps. And
I think that this to me, and I could be wrong, but this is the part of the conversation where that is aligned with what's happening at Wolfe Street, right? So the city's lane is the shelter portion of that, and so that has been done. And now the data being collected is like, okay, so what do people need there that they're not getting? And it's really just provincial support for things that are not in our lane of the city to provide or find funding for, right? And I know personally that those health systems have been gutted, have been absolutely gutted, right? And the really scary layer to all of this, about what you said earlier about the old institutional thing, I can't even tell you how often it comes up. And I think there's even movement to try to bring that back with the county. Like it is people are looking at that to bring back that model, right? And that's really scary to me.
Incredibly scary.
Yeah. And then the last thing I'll say is that my friend is an Indigenous artist, homeless, with a brain injury, and it was impossible for him to tap into the services because he needed a cell phone. He didn't have a cell phone, so they would call my cell phone, and I couldn't find him, and he just never got the help that he needed. And his situation only got worse because of his condition, because the people that were there to help him couldn't meet him where he was at.
Thank you. I would like to pick up on Alex's mention of pressure for funding. I'm probably the oldest person in the room, and I have a history in developmental back to the deinstitutionalization days, so thank you for saying that. What are our biggest challenges? Bringing back the federal and the provincial governments to the table. We produced in Peterborough almost 2,000 units. Do we know this? 2,000 units of affordable, and I hate that word now, we need rent geared to income.
Yes.
Right? Woo! And we have those units, and they are coming offline because mortgages are finished, and each of those projects has to find their own way of continuing to keep their rents low. So at a very high level, please lobby and push and vote for bringing back meaningful participation by the federal and provincial government in housing. Yeah. We have that little thin edge of the wedge with the project on Monaghan Road and the provincial funding that was mentioned already at the table. As for bringing people of lived experience in, there are ways of buddying with people, right? We all know people who are marginalized. And if we have other gatherings like this, or go to a city council meeting, or get on a committee, maybe we can all work at mentoring someone to come with you and learning how to do this in a meaningful way. And I think to go very systemic on this, we're all talking about money, and we mentioned wealth and Wolfe Street. And, we need to recognize that we live in an extraordinarily ruthless capitalist system.
Yeah.
And unless we can decommodify housing, it's not selling pork bellies, it's not that kind of thing. And if we can definancialize it too and go back, the final point is, on its website for its entire existence, Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation, which is the kind of flow-through and advisory body for the federal government, still lists, go there, that affordable housing is 30% or less of your income. Do we see that in the projects? No. Hold CMHC's feet to the fire, municipalities.
Yeah, and that is not from the city, right? So with the Monaghan build, what the city has to do is they have to max out their rent supplements to make it truly affordable. 30% of income or max shelter allowance, right? And that's from that's from you, that's from us, that's from our tax base, right? And so I think at AMO last year there was a big push to try to redefine what what affordable rent meant, and they were going to try to make it to be a regional thing instead of an Ontario-wide thing, so they could look at different cities, what their economic state was like, and develop like a specific definition of affordability. But those are the kind of higher level things politically to maybe push for.
So this has been on my mind for quite a while, and I feel like this is a safe space to say this, but like the thing that like really has been getting me lately is like that we all work in these different little silos, and we touched on it and like what you've been saying. Sorry. But like indigenous issues and mental health issues and incarceration, they're all interconnected, and it's been really weighing heavily on me, all of the things that have been going on in this world, like Palestine and Ukraine, I think it's third year in war, and the landfill still hasn't been searched, and we're still uncovering my ancestors' bodies at residential schools, and it's all just like weighing heavily, and it all interconnects, and like I can't find a way to like compartmentalize it in my brain, and I know that this affects a lot of people in this room. I had a question and now I can't think of what it was. I needed to get that off my chest, and I know like as a city councilor, these also affect you, and I don't know if you have anything to say or advice or something.
We invited commentary, Tamer. That was beautiful. Thank you. Yeah, one last. These are not things that we compartmentalize on our bodies, right? And I think that that's important to remember.
So I don't want to take away from that. That was, heavy weight that we're all carrying. But on a different front, I have a question for Alex. You mentioned expressing our appreciation for council's, better moves. And I wondered, would like an action item for this whole group be to write, have a campaign of letter writing or phone calls saying like, we support these actions. Is that useful? Would that make a difference?
Thank you, Alicia. Yeah, I mean, the form letters where it's all the same just get, like, no one acknowledges those. It's the more personal ones and to use personal connections. So, like, Dr. Beamish would be a great person to maybe have Jeff Leal's ear, right? It's about using, like, this is we suffer from this small townism here where everyone knows everyone. So, like I said at the beginning, this is just a game. So, let's be strategic about who communicates with you and how those messages are, and get to the right people. Right? Like maybe someone else is better to talk to Gary Baldwin than me, right? And it's about connecting with those people individually about the issues, to try to get them to see it differently or feel it from how we feel it, And I think it has to be timed. So I think when the report comes back that looks at the Wolfe Street, that would be the time if people had the capacity to say thank you. Like this is what we want. This is the start of what we want. You know, if that's something you were comfortable with, and for the only reason that it would just validate the minority progressive voice that is pushing for all of these things. It would just validate our approach, right?
Okay, last comment or question.
I just want to respond to my friend Tabor and Bierk. Anyway, I felt that, but I've just been watching Wob Canoe. If anybody's been watching what's been going on in Manitoba, the landfill, he's going to search the landfill. There's money. I saw the other day at a conference about healthcare, and he says, there's money. It's about money. We have the money. So you know what? I watch that because it's hope. I feel very small in it, but hopefully, you know, if anybody's watching, Ontario needs a Wob Canoe.
Yeah, we do.
We've got our Wob Canoe counselor anyway. Claude says we need more of that. Election, municipal election will be 2026, but just get involved. Everybody, thank you. Love your work.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Research for Social Change Lab podcast. To stay up to date with our latest episodes, be sure to follow us on Apple Music, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. For more information on the Research for Social Change Lab's activities, including past, present, and future projects, visit socialchangelab.ca.